Hello, I'd like to welcome everybody to Inside the Avatar Studio. My name is Kevin Feenan, or in Second Life, I'm also known as Phelan Coramel. I'm the founder of Rockcliffe University Consortium, and with us today we have Philippe. And Philippe, I apologize, I always get your last name wrong, and I just realized I should probably have double-checked it. Philippe Turk?
Philippe Took.
Took, like a Canadian. Excellent, I love it.
Yes, exactly.
And Philippe is with the, well, actually both Philippe and Andrew are both with the University of Cincinnati. And we have Andrew Hughes with us as well, who not only is a professor with the University of Cincinnati, but also is the CEO of Designing Digitally. So I'd like to welcome you both to Inside the Avatar Studio.
Thanks so much. It's great to be here.
Yes, thank you.
Great. So what I was hoping that we could talk about was essentially the state of education as it's existing with inside virtual worlds today, and some of the interesting things that have really sort of been happening of late. Certainly there has been a lot of movement that has been happening, and I mean, first of all, with the announcement at the SLCC of the closing down of the Teen Grid on Second Life, and then subsequently with regards to Linden Lab's pricing policy that just came out a little while ago. A lot of what's happening with that, I think, has really been forcing educators to rethink the way they're approaching virtual worlds. And I guess where I really want to start off with, you know, being as both of you are sort of front and center inside the education field, where have you sort of been seeing a lot of the movement sort of been going, and some of the conversations that have been happening over the last several weeks specifically?
Well, I guess, you know, I think that the changes from both Linden Lab and I would say it's twofold. It's Linden Lab as well as the rapid development of OpenSim as a promising platform that has gained a lot of stability in the last year. In addition to real-world economic pressures. And I think the conversations that I'm hearing, I just had a meeting today with a group of, there are some 20-some institutions on the list, and you know, I think everyone is, nobody wants to full-sail move out of Second Life because we've invested much in the platform. So those who can afford to stay here, I think, plan to, even if they may be forced to reduce some of their campus size. So many people are talking about, you know, cutting their virtual campuses in half. But in addition to staying in Second Life, I think that I don't know of any institutions that aren't talking about exploring OpenSim, and that's a big difference. Just this summer at the Second Life Community Convention, when Philip came and he talked about education and he announced the Teen Grid closing, you know, there was a little bit of rumbling about OpenSim, but just a few months ago this was not on everybody's radar as a must-do thing this year, and I think that that has changed because of the pricing announcement and some of the other moves that Linden Lab has made. I don't know of a single institution at this point that isn't at least talking about OpenSim and in a let's start working on this now, not next year kind of way.
Right, and I can solidify what she's stating. We've had many clients still keep some of the sims that they've had. They are dropping about 50% of their sims and just trying to take up less space and do the same amount of workload inside of this virtual environment as possible. But we have many of them requesting to have content migration to OpenSim and to have a private sim that is then hypergrided to, let's say, OS Grid or Reaction Grid, so on and so forth. So you're very correct, Philippe.
Yeah, and I just, I think I also read this morning, we were talking about it this morning, that I think John Lester, Pathfinder Linden, was just hired by Reaction Grid, I think, to do some education outreach for them. So I think in terms of where are people moving, the grids that I'm hearing most frequently mentioned, those who are sort of standing up their own test grid to just play around are connecting to Open OS Grid because it's you know, easy to sort of connect to them openly. But if they're moving or looking for a hosted solution, they're moving to Reaction Grid and Jocadia's Grid, actually, if you know Joe K from Australia.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's one of the, we're doing it pretty much exactly the same thing here at Rockcliffe. I mean, we are planning on making a move to one or more. I mean, we're not necessarily looking at necessarily going to just one OpenSim environment. We may open up sort of like a satellite campus in different areas. But I mean, we're sort of in a different boat. We're sort of dependent a lot on the social network sort of being there. And as you said, I mean, the social network right now is sort of being spread to the four corners of the metaverse. So for us, it's a fairly important thing to know where the social connections, the social organizations going. But for other groups, I mean, when you're talking from the University of Cincinnati standpoint, and we were fortunate that we got to hear a little bit from the people at Purdue a couple of days ago at our open house. But I mean, from the University of Cincinnati standpoint, what are the advantages that they're seeing in terms of going to an OpenSim environment? As you said, I mean, this is very, very quick in terms of how people are looking at this. And I guess one of the things that I'm wondering about is when you're dealing with a closed social network, which tends to happen in a university setting. I mean, you're essentially bringing a social network with you, right? You're not sort of going there because there's a social network already there. From a strategic standpoint, from a tactical standpoint, what are you guys thinking about in terms of the type of benefits that you're looking at from an OpenSim environment?
Well, I think there are a couple of different things that we're considering. First of all, I think the content, the ability to develop content that we know will be portable to other places is very important, because one of the things we've realized, of course, as have many of us, right, we've all invested thousands and thousands of man-hours in developing the spaces and builds and learning objects and avatars and all of the content that we've spent years creating in this grid, in Second Life, that now we, at this point can't take out. And while I know there have been lots of criticisms about educators taking advantage of free content, of course we use free content and purchase content, but we've also developed our own things as well. And our island is a mishmash of things that we've created as well as things that others have created. And one of the issues that we're one of the benefits of using OpenSim is if we develop our content in our own grid, then of course we will be able to export that content wherever we want. So that's one thing. And of course the other big issue is cost. Certainly after yesterday's election, in Ohio anyway, there was a Republican landslide, and the reports are that this is going to result in really severe budget cuts for education. So coupled with Linden Lab's pricing policy change and what looks like a tightening political climate in the real world, we simply have to justify literally every penny we're spending. And when we have a 4-SIM campus in Second Life right now, and we will, of course, lock in the reduced rate that Linden Lab offered, so we'll be able to pay in advance for a couple of SIMs, but we're definitely going to reduce our land holdings here because we had one SIM that was basically a development space for us to practice, for our faculty to play around. It's not really something that visitors necessarily need access to or need to use anyway, and so it doesn't make any sense to pay Linden Lab for a space that we're basically using as a sandbox when we could do that for free. You know what I mean?
Yep. Andrew, are you finding the same thing with how you're using SL at the moment, or?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. We still have a large demand for behind the firewall solutions, especially many of our corporate clients. And doing cost analysis and them already having ventured interest inside of Second Life, OpenSim has been their number one choice after providing the research and analysis. We have been looking at other engines for the browser-based virtual worlds that we've had a large demand for, at least in our client list. But I can tell you, there's just like Philippe stated, they are not leaving Second Life as of yet. I think just like Philippe stated again, the fact that the prices went up so high, and the fact that the people that were laid off by Linden Lab are now joining the effort inside of OpenSim speaks a lot for what the OpenSim community can provide to many of us that have been very dedicated to Second Life for so long.
Yeah, I would think though that there'd be a huge issue, because I mean there was a issue that came up a few years ago where one company, and I'm not going to mention any names, but I mean, one company essentially set up an OpenSim environment. They, attracted a whole pile of people to the environment. They then turned around and said, we don't like this group of people over here, so they essentially, threw them out and kept all the content. Right? I mean, these OpenSim environments are, in some cases they're being run by one or two people that don't necessarily have the breadth of business experience that some public education or any type of public organization may be looking for in terms of management expertise and the ability to manage a sustainable ongoing enterprise.
Kevin, this is my thought process on that. If you look at the way that web hosting is done, you can look down the street and look in your local neighborhood and find someone who's probably hosting a few websites. But then there's large companies such as GoDaddy, 1&1. We all know of the large web hosting companies, and basically the way that OpenSim has presented itself is it can be hosted by a plethora of people, and they could all be small companies or very large companies. It really comes down to your preference and what you're going to feel most comfortable as a consumer in investing your data and your hosting with.
Yeah, and I think that universities in particular are going to have choices, and it's going to come down to where your institution is in the exploration of virtual worlds as an educational platform. I think that those who are sort of latecomers to the game may still opt with Second Life because Linden Lab is an established company. It's got the largest user base. It has the largest content repository. I think at this point, the folks that I've been talking with, you're faced with the problem, right? Do you have the technical ability? Do you have the staff? Do you have the infrastructure and funding? And obviously all campuses have servers and internet connections and broadband and that sort of thing, at least in the U.S. Surprisingly, actually, some of the international schools, broadband is still an issue for them. So hosting their own SIMs or connecting to a larger grid if they're running the SIMs themselves can be a problem. But I think most U.S. institutions, bandwidth isn't the issue. It's the staff problem. Can you justify to your dean or to your department head that it's worth paying a system administrator to run the system for you? And I think some schools, don't have those resources available. And so, I think the big question, at least one of the things that I'm concerned about, is the education community in Second Life started early, and we had a number of communication tools, not just in world groups that we've all joined, but the sled list and other tools outside of Second Life that kept us sort of in a cohesive group so that we were able to communicate and share with one another our resources, our builds, and that made Second Life very attractive. One of the things that I'm worried about is someone in the local chat mentioned diaspora, and I think that that's a really apt word. I'm somewhat concerned that if everyone sort of flies off to the four corners of the metaverse and everyone's working on their own grid and their own content and doing their own thing, and we lose some of that cohesiveness, I worry that there will be a lot of recreating of the wheel and a lot of wasted time, resources, and money, as well as losing the opportunity, even with hypergrid. I think that some people are mistakenly thinking OpenSim is a magic bullet that's going to replace Second Life, lock, stock, and barrel, and at least my experience is that that is not the case. While OpenSim has certainly really developed in leaps and bounds in the last year, it's still not as stable, and if you go with a hosted solution, you don't know necessarily who the grid operator is, and I think that there are still technical challenges. For example, they just upgraded OpenSim to the 0.7 version, and the hypergrid 1.5 isn't compatible with the previous version, so it won't be as easy, for example, for me to take my students on a virtual field trip. I'll have to check and see if the place that I'm going is, compatible with my version of OpenSim and my version of hypergrid, and that's not even, bringing up the issue of the viewers, which, of course, there are many different viewers out there as well. So I think we're in a really interesting point in time. I don't know that there's any consensus yet on where exactly everyone is going, what exactly the OpenSim distribution they're using, or even what viewer we'll all be interacting with. I think it's still kind of an open question right now.
Well, it's interesting from a certain standpoint because, okay, I'll show my age a little bit here. I'm looking at a lot of this stuff, and there's two things that are coming to mind as I'm looking at what's happening. One is this concept that OpenSim essentially has been, and I don't know if it's going to continue to be this way, but it has been a trailing technology. Linden Lab goes out, they develop something, and then all of a sudden the OpenSim community comes along and says, "Oops, we got to follow lock, stock, and barrel." And to me, that's a strategic risk for OpenSim, because if OpenSim has any hope of replacing or competing head-to-head properly with Linden Labs, they essentially have to take on a direction of their own, and that's one thing that I've been thinking of recent. I mean, the other has been this concept. I'm quite sure both of you are fully aware of, the conflict that happened early on with regards to operating systems and Unix, where we had a group of well-meaning companies all trying to get together to create interoperability standards for Unix operating platform. The next thing you know, you've got 20 different flavors of it, none of which talk to one another. Right? I mean, people have short memories, but it looks as if there's the potential that we're going to go that same route with the OpenSim platform. And I don't know how you feel about either one of those two particular insights.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I know is definitely happening, I'm involved with the IETF VRAP protocol. There are efforts ongoing to talk about standards for interoperability between their Second Life-like worlds. OpenSim is one, of course. There's also the Real Extend Nolly development. There are a couple of other sort of flavors of OpenSim that are in development, and I think that everybody's part of or at least trying to pay attention to the conversations with the IETF and the IEEE standards. But again, like I said, we're at this point in time right now where I don't think anything has emerged as consensus. There's just a lot of conversation going on. And I think that if for people who are interested in exploring OpenSim and going in this direction, I think that the best thing for us to do is to try to do a better job of communicating with each other and sharing the results of our individual efforts and collaborations. I mean, in Ohio, we're just starting the conversation. The Ohio Learning Network is a consortium of 80 colleges and universities in Ohio. And I have the lovely title of Second Life Ambassador. And so I'm going to have to talk to them about changing my title, because hopefully I won't be the ambassador just for Second Life for very long. But basically we're talking with Ohio State University and Bowling Green State University and many of the schools in Ohio to see if we can't formalize an articulation agreement, some kind of memorandum of understanding that we want to do this together as much as we can and collaborate. And if other states do this, or other regions or other groups or consortia that already exist, maybe ISTE, some of the existing EDUCAUSE, there are lots of communities that already have good communication networks established. The important thing is that we share the information as we go into the OpenSim metaverse and starting our own projects. And wherever we can share, content's a great example. If I build a couch, my student team at the University of Cincinnati builds a couch, and we're building that, basically with grant dollars that the grant requires us to release the contents of our work to the public. Well, then that's an open source couch, and I would be happy to share it with every other university that's going into OpenSim. But how do we pool that content together? Is there an alternative to the Second Life marketplace for OpenSim worlds yet? So I think some of this stuff doesn't quite exist yet, but I think that that's where we'll start to see this moving.
Philippe, you're very right. I just sent a link to you. IEEE is working on the metaverse standards for exactly what you're talking about, and one of the conversations that we just had in an email thread last week was the conversation over how we would take care of an inventory, the user's preferences, avatar preferences, and the conversation really led to having all of that data external from the actual virtual environment so that it could be interoperable between virtual spaces, and all of your data is tracked in a separate repository. And I completely understand where you're coming from. That step to be even able to gather the material that we have now and migrate is already a job in itself.
But there's a couple of interesting things that I sort of want to pick up on, and there's actually been 4 or 5 that you've sort of talked about. I want to step back a little bit in terms of something that Philip had talked about. I think it was at the SLCC in Florida, and I'm not quite sure if that's where it was or not, but he was talking about this idea of having a almost like a domain hosting service, except for avatar names and for avatar profiles. Right, and I know a little bit, Avatars United was supposed to be a little bit towards that particular aim, and then it got sort of shuffled off towards a Facebook style and then just sort of bit the biscuit. But, I mean, things like those particular types of things, I mean, we're talking about a repository for creative, open Creative Commons objects that can be brought into a virtual world. Certainly when we look at things such as meshes, I mean, there's a lot of services out there where you can get a lot of mesh items that you can bring into a digital world, but the cost associated with it is just sort of way out of sight compared to what we can get inside Second Life currently. So, I mean, where do you see some of those things going? I mean, we touch a little bit on the content piece, but I'm wondering with regards to the avatar piece and the ability to jump and the ability to have that more holistic view of control over the individual avatar and the ability to take your currency, such as it is, or being able to take your inventory or anything else as you go from place to place.
Well, I think this is one of those challenges that the interoperability efforts that we've posted some links in the chat there, the IEEE and the IETF, there have to be agreements between grids, and there have to be technical protocols to allow that to happen. And certainly, anyone who's explored OpenSim has had the experience, right? One of the grids that I went to, Fleep Took was taken. And I'm telling you, my name is it's unique on the web. If you do a Google search, there was no previous Fleep Took before my avatar. So, somebody created an account with what I feel like is my name there. So I think issues of identity and portability and being, logging into a grid for the first time and I have to go bald because I can't stand the system here. Those are the experiences we're all having. Those are sort of hammered out, and there's a technical, and of course that's what Hypergrid is allowing you to do. So there are several different things that are developing sort of at the same time, and I don't know how that will work. We've had conversations where, is there going to be like a DNS service for your avatar name, as somebody mentioned in the chat, so that I can be Fleep Took wherever I go? And I don't have to create a new account on every single grid. I don't know, because it brings up just tremendous security concerns. Are we going to use an authentication system like OpenID? For universities, of course, my university uses LDAP. Is it possible that when we create student accounts, we can tie into an existing LDAP system? And as far as the content goes, I think that's a really big can of worms. I still haven't... We've been talking about this issue for years now, and I still don't see an easy solution, except to say that at this point in time, virtual worlds, the metaverse is still in its absolute infancy. And while I understand and appreciate people's need and desire to make a reasonable living from their work, I also think that the open source model of sharing content is very helpful for like institutions like mine, where budget concerns are what they are, and I'm hopeful that in exchange for free content, of course, my students and my faculty and the research teams that exist at universities all over the place can help contribute to the technology piece, and that we'll start to see universities investing not just money, but also research. I'd like to see more master's students doing their thesis, doing research on virtual worlds technology, and can we contribute to the community in that way by helping solve some of these technical challenges, because I just don't see any easy answers that are out there right now. I don't know if that answered your question at all. Basically, it was like, I don't know.
Well,
that's the answer. I don't know.
Yeah. From the business perspective, one of the biggest problems that we're going to have with interoperability and even making these decisions is if we're really going to look outside of just OpenSim and Second Life and talk about interoperability between other engines, we really are going to have a pushback from many of those businesses. It's really going to be hard to convince, let's say, Blue Mars to, release code for interoperability to directly connect into Second Life, and so on and so forth. So Philippe is right, as always, and stating that don't know what's going to happen, but from a business standpoint, it's going to be very tough. It's sharing information and sharing intellectual property and knowledge that, from a business standpoint, is what is keeping you alive. It's going to be very tough for the convincing of having that interoperability.
Well, I mean, you brought up Blue Mars, and that is sort of leading towards another, because I mean, we've had there's been a lot of talk going on in terms of OpenSim, but Andrew, as you presented a couple of weeks ago at the ACE eLearn conference, there's over 450 some odd virtual worlds that are out there. I mean, Second Life and OpenSim are not the only two, and certainly there are some very high-end ones that sort of blow away anything that we're doing here, but they're extremely expensive. And then there's some other ones that are maybe reasonably competitive, but are just sort of unknown. Yeah, Unity 3D, for example, somebody was just mentioning in the audience here. The the movement to Unity 3D and the movement to Blue Mars or to Teleplace or to VenueGen. I mean, with regards to your discussion with your peer groups, has there been a lot of talk with regards to some of these other virtual world environments?
Oh, absolutely, and it comes back to what I was stating before this, before we started the conference about mesh. Oftentimes, what we're finding is many of our clients are asking to experiment in other virtual worlds, especially from the negative publicity that Second Life has been getting for the past couple months, and so we've been looking at other virtual worlds, and they really want us to create the content material in 3D modeling programs such as Maya, Blender, 3D Studio Max, so that they can take that data, have those 3D models, and be able to import them into multiple virtual worlds. We have clients that work in everything from we've worked in Unity 3D, Olive, Blue Mars, VastPark. We've worked in the C4 engine, the Unreal Engine, Web.alive, and I can tell you OpenSim and Second Life, and what they want is exactly what Second Life is bringing to the table, the ability to have that data outside and import it in. But at the same time, there's still a very large push for OpenSim because it's easier to convert the data that has been made, the content that you've been made in your Second Life sim. It's easier to convert it over to OpenSim. Plus, this is a platform that we're very familiar with. So we still are going to see a large popularity with OpenSim regardless of other virtual worlds, especially with the migration of Second Life people, I guess.
Yeah, if I can just jump in there, I think that the big thing for me, the big question is, at least for my purposes and the research that my team is doing at UC, if a world doesn't have user-generated content, and by that I mean the ability to easily create objects myself and place it in the world without having to learn Blender or Maya or something that requires a third-party program that you basically need professional training to use, then I'm less interested in it. And so that's where I think the rub comes with some of these other platforms. Without user-generated content, you don't have the same kind of dynamic, changing world and the same kinds of opportunities for students to be creative. And in lots of teaching and learning applications, it's that ability for the students to be creative themselves in the environment that makes this interesting. And so it will, of course, I think in an educational context, depend on what your goals are. If you're creating a game, let's say, where the content's going to be somewhat static and the programming and the learning experience is designed to run a certain way and there doesn't need to be dynamic content, then that's where I see some other platforms being more useful. But for the faculty who are looking at this environment, say our architecture professors and art professors and even even like the biology department, and I mean, Second Life is used at my university by just the most broad range of programs, and part of what they're interested in isn't just going out and seeing and experiencing canned content. It's creating things, and so I think that's where some of these other platforms are of less interest to those faculty members, because while we could hire designers to develop spaces for our faculty, many of the faculty are interested in having students create content, and so Unity is an example. I mean, as far as I know, correct me if I'm wrong, Andrew, but that's a static environment, right? You can't in real time change the scene that you're in.
Yeah, you are correct. And Philippe, I completely agree with you. From an educational standpoint, it makes a lot of sense to be able to have someone create the content. Many of our clients are corporate, and really they want to use it for communication. They want to get in there. They want to make it as flexible as possible. So, and that's a whole other conversation about the flexibility of these two environments, OpenSim and Second Life, compared to a thin-based client like Unity can provide. But from an educational standpoint, OpenSim is a very, very smart way to go. Now, what we see right this minute is there's a lot of opportunity for people that have been Second Life developers to actually, help in the migration of this content to OpenSim. So anyone out there that's, a Second Life developer, that's something that if you haven't, I would suggest at least offering to your clients. Yeah.
I want to come back to the education thing with regards to sort of enablers and blockers that we've been sort of working around. I mean, we've been talking a lot about the technology, but I mean, Philippe, if you remember back when we were in Florida for the Second Life Communities Conference back then, one of the things that came out of that conference was a letter to Linden Lab that basically said, on top of a number of other things, these are the things that we really want. And
you mean the letter that they completely ignored?
Yeah. I remind them of that every once in a while when I get a chance to talk to them. But pretty much. But I mean, there was a lot of things that were on that letter, and I know I had a few things that we've never seen really inside virtual worlds. So I mean, peer-to-peer file sharing, for example, to me is huge. The ability that you can bring in a PDF document, you can hand that out to your class, so that you can hand notes, or you can hand out documents or spreadsheets or whatever else. I mean, there's certainly a lot more that could be done inside this environment than we currently have, and could be done very easily. So I'm wondering what you see, compare sort of where we were at that particular point to sort of where we are right now, and what it is you'd still like to see brought into these particular environments.
That's a really great question, and the sad truth of the matter is, and I've been an advocate for Second Life and virtual worlds since at least 2005. So we're talking about a 5-year time frame, and the sad truth is that while there have been many additions in the feature set, and they added sculpties and flexies and voice and all of these things, the truth is that the technology has not kept pace with what I expected and what I think many other people expected. Mm-hmm. If you look at Second Life today, it looks very much like Second Life of 2005. And there are lots of things that have happened on the web in the same amount of time. Twitter, Facebook, all of YouTube has grown exponentially. We've seen, and how long did it take for us to be able to play a YouTube video in Second Life? That just came out this year. And so, in terms of what I would like to see, in order for virtual worlds, for Second Life or any other platform to really be useful, I can't be required to use 10 different things to teach my class. And until Linden Lab focuses on the actual the technological innovation that would make this platform a single place where I can bring in a PDF document, where my class Twitter feed is integrated seamlessly into the interface, where we can post updates to our Blackboard course website and it not be as excruciatingly painful as it is with the new media on a prim. I mean, these are the things that we need. And we've talked extensively about the lack of APIs. It's absolutely ridiculous at this point in time that my students, when we create student accounts, we have an entire student information system that tracks all of our courses, all of our faculty, all of our students, and there's no way for me to pull that data out of our student information system, feed it to Second Life, and have our course groups automatically created, and have our faculty automatically enrolled with the faculty role, and have our students automatically put in there. I mean, right now it's still a manual process. When I have 10 new classes starting for fall quarter, one of my student employees has to go in by hand and send out group invites that the students half the time don't see and don't accept. And it takes hours to get students enrolled in a course group. I mean, those are the kinds of things that I really hope that Linden Lab, and it's not just for education, I'm sure that businesses and corporate users and enterprise users, and even regular users, I mean, even, the museums and nonprofit organizations, anybody who's got existing data systems that they would like to tie into Second Life, that can only be a win for the platform. So I hope that they've talked about this year, this big announcement that they're going to focus on the basics, on getting the technology, improving the technology so that this is more fast, friendly, and fun. Well, if they want to do that, then these are the kinds of things that they need to be looking at. Making it fast, easy, and fun for me, the person who's out there bringing in new users. And until they address those issues, I really don't see how this can be anything but a niche platform.
Well, the fast, easy, and fun part was in relationship to how quickly Linden Lab could drain your pocketbook. All right, maybe not, but it seems that way from time to time.
I'm just laughing, Kevin. Nothing was said. Just laughing. Chris, Philippe, you made a very good point. We have had, I would say 15 to 20% at the beginning of our clients use Second Life, get really enthusiastic about it, start to work with it, and about 6 months to a year they realize that this is a major pain to get their new employees in, be able to open these ports and allowing to purchase more bandwidth to be able to do this. They wanted the flexibility of browser-based virtual world to just click and log in like their WebEx, and we've had to migrate clients to that, and we are now seeing a bigger demand for that just because they're tired of jumping through the hoops. Now, I state that because, in all retrospect, Linden Lab at Second Life has revolutionized the way that we even look at virtual worlds and what we define as a virtual world. But at the same time, they have ignored many requests. Sorry, I have a dog barking. And shh. They have ignored many of our requests.
Well, I think the thing, I don't want to just, sound like I'm just bashing Linden Lab. I certainly agree that Linden Lab single-handedly re-energized the virtual environment space. And, I still remember vividly my first experiences here and just the sort of crazy concept that here was a space that I could change, and that power of creation is so powerful. That experience of being able to develop something that I share with other people and have them interact with it and with me at the same time, it's a very powerful thing that they did do. I guess I'm just frustrated at this point. I think that many of the lessons that we can learn with where the technology is today, we've seen phenomenal art installations, phenomenal performances in Second Life, and it's always, you feel the magic of the moment, but as a creator and as a consumer of these experiences in this environment, that it could be so much better, that it could be easier to create, that it could be easier to experience. That I still have to teach people how to sit in Second Life, that I have to, we brought in a group of students yesterday. It's their first time in Second Life, and of course the first thing, if you've ever brought a class in Second Life, you know that the first hour is nothing but them playing with their hair and, figuring out how to customize their avatar. And, just the process of getting your avatar dressed for a new user is still so painful. Why isn't there an easy avatar customization screen right at the beginning where you can pick from 20 different hairstyles, and not to undercut content creators or anything like that, but it's just the process of bringing people in is still pretty darn difficult, even with the new viewer and some of the other changes that they've made. And I think in terms of what I would ask for from Linden Lab, Viewer 2 while and I've been a proponent of Viewer 2, I haven't been one of the haters who refused to use it. I started using it the first day it came out, and I haven't looked back since. There are lots of improvements that I really appreciate. But moving away from industry standards so that there's no file menu at the top, file, edit, view, you know, the things that are at the top of every Windows application you've ever seen, you know, those kinds of things make the learning curve actually more difficult. So I hope that as they move forward, they look at what are industry standards for how to do things in other similar applications and design the experience. Pardon?
I was about to say, please do not introduce a ribbon. Please, 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 please do not introduce that damn ribbon.
Right. I mean, these are the kinds of things that you know, we wish we could have a conversation with them and know that it was being heard. These are the things that make using this platform and introducing it to other people just, it's still teeth-grittingly hard. You know what I mean?
It's brute force. It is. And I mean, I've been saying this for quite some time, is that, you know, to me, this is sort of second generation virtual world technology, in that, you know, you look at VRML, which was sort of first generation, and, you know, really there were some things going on there, but the technology really hadn't caught up. Now all of a sudden we're into this sort of version, and it's still, everything that we do in here is a absolute brute force approach. It takes so long to get things done. It takes so long to make things happen, to make that magic happen. And when people do it, from what I've seen anyways, when people do it well, I mean, it is just so well done. And you know, as you said, knowing what goes into content creation in here, you know, looking at some of these things, exactly how many hours people have put into this type of stuff. Right? And it's got to be easier at some point down the road.
Right, and you know, I think that's where I mean, you remember the hype of a couple of years ago. Everybody and his brother was interested in Second Life, and you know, Second Life was mentioned in the same sentence when people talked about new media. Right. They said Facebook, Twitter, Second Life, YouTube. I mean, you know, I gave you know, millions of presentations at educational conferences around the country, and the conversation was about social media and new media, and Second Life was part of that conversation. And people came in and they looked at it and they said, you know what, this is still too hard. It's still too difficult. Even if I can, well, there are two problems actually that I think it boiled down to. There was, on one level, it's too hard to actually execute my vision. I have a vision of what I want to do here now that I understand what this is, and the things that I'd like to be able to do aren't easy. For example, why on earth are there not easily implemented NPC characters in Second Life? Why isn't there an easy way for me to have an avatar manning the gate at UC that can answer basic questions? I mean, every game I've ever played has an NPC character that will give you quests, and the way that you program that dialogue is pretty straightforward and pretty simple, but it's darn difficult to do here. So I think that on one level, people who came in and understood what this was and then had a vision for how to use it found that executing that vision was just too difficult and time-consuming. So ultimately, too expensive, either in time or money. And the other problem that we face is that, you know, you bring a faculty member in here and say to them, you know, if you could imagine any environment to teach your class in, what would you do? If you could take your students anywhere, if you could create any kind of experience for them, what can you imagine? And you know what? They can't imagine anything. The sort of social norms and cultural sort of barriers that keep us locked into doing what we've always known. If you tell a faculty member you could teach your class anywhere, it doesn't have to be in a classroom with 4 walls and a bunch of desks, what would you do? They have no idea. They really have just a total, like, what? Well, I have no idea where I would take my students. So I think that on one level it's a technical problem, and on another level it's a social problem, a cultural problem. I don't think that, generally speaking, the public is sort of imaginatively ready to deal with the open-ended flexibility that virtual worlds give us. I don't think that our imaginations have caught up even with the technology that we're complaining about. Okay, so here's a little bit of the brutal question then, because this is one of the things that drives me nuts every time I hear about this. The last year and a half, I have heard nothing but the Gartner hype cycle in terms of where we are
in this hype cycle, and I know I'm pretty sure both of you know exactly what I'm referring to. The to my way of looking at it, I mean, we're nowhere close to even having gone over the hump, right? We're going through a whole pile of little wildly fluctuating things. Yeah, very slow rise, so to speak. I mean, as Mel Burns was putting out, and essentially there is not the social acceptance yet. And although, and I guess this is just my personal experience, although you can actually walk into a business office or a meeting or a faculty or whatever else, and you can say, hey, I've got an avatar, and you're not looked as if you belong in a straitjacket. You can start to do that now, but it's still not the social acceptance of what is going on with Inside Virtual Worlds is still not there. Mm-hmm. And so I'm wondering what you guys have been seeing with regards to that.
I can say that I agree with the hype cycle situation from my standpoint, from a business standpoint, not necessarily from an educational standpoint. What we're seeing at our company is that we have seen, just like I said, 450 virtual worlds, or what they classify as a virtual world, are now available for anyone to use. However, what we see is virtual spaces appearing for different segments of markets. So what we're seeing is specialized virtual worlds. Just like right now in OpenSim and grids, we see specialized grids, educational focus grids, general focus grids, adult focus grids, so on and so forth. So what I think is going to happen is, while we keep climbing the escalator, you're going to see more specialization in businesses that are providing virtual world spaces, doing it for specific industries. And that's what I envision. I might be completely crazy, but that's just my thoughts.
I think that's probably true in terms, I don't know about in the corporate world. I have very little experience with that, but certainly the average Joe on the street has never heard of Second Life for sure. And their kids play games. I mean, when I'm trying to connect with an audience and introducing this concept for the first time, depending on, and I don't want to make too many generalizations about age demographics, because in my experience, the get it light bulb moment that happens is not actually age dependent. I know plenty of 60-year-olds and 70-year-olds who get virtual worlds, and plenty of 18-year-old freshmen who don't. So I don't think it's fair to make broad age generalizations. But having said that, certainly the older generation is less familiar with technology, and I think that there's still the stigma of anything that looks, walks, and talks like a video game, that instantly is associated with the sweaty nerd in the basement kind of thing. And the male gamer stereotype still holds sway in the public mind. And I'm not sure what it will take in order for that to change, except to say that as the average gamer at this point is something like 32. I'm 34, so I guess I'm right in that center demographic there. And I think as our generation, people in their 30s and 40s who have been gaming their whole lives, get into positions where we're the ones holding the purse strings, I think institutionally we'll start to see those cultural norms change. Because at least the problem that I and many other folks, sort of innovating in this space face is that while I get it, and my peers get it, and a lot of the students in the classes get it, and some of the faculty get it, a lot of the administrators don't. So the guy who decides, what the money gets spent on, has no gaming experience at all, except to know that his son does it too much and it's wrecked his life. And so, he's kind of questioning whether or not this is something we really should be getting into. And I think it might just take time and for us to get older for that cultural perception to change.
Yeah, I agree. From the business standpoint, it's very hard. We've had many younger promoted managers that have had an interest in having a virtual world space. One of the biggest problems they have is actually being that champion and selling it to the middle or upper level management, just because of what you stated. They look at it, first thing they say when we come in to present. This could be an extremely large company. We're sitting there with the executives. We open up this virtual environment, and they go, "So you got me in this meeting to show me a game?" So we're going to have that for quite a while.
Yeah. What about, so sort of building on that, what about classical examples of things that have been done really well? And it doesn't have to be in Second Life. When I'm referring to this, I mean anywhere. It could be Jocadia, it could be OpenSim, it could be here, it could be VenueGen, it could be Blue Mars, wherever. But I mean, certainly one of the things that, to my way of looking at things, would help enable change are really, really good examples of things that have been, or groups that have gone out and have sort of outperformed the norm, right? So if we look at what Memorial University over in Newfoundland has done, they've developed an entire sim, which is the backdrop to Native American culture, a story with regards to Native American culture called Munji Becomes a Man. And it's a walking tour of the opening chapter of that particular story, and then they build the rest of the program from there. And it's a really interesting thing that they've done. We've had Kayvon and Abacus who are been working with Rockcliffe a fair bit, and they've been doing things like the Book of the Dead. They've been recreating the situational areas with regards to that, and then talking about the idea of narratives and what have you within that area. From both of your experiences, what are things that you see in here that educators should really be paying attention to in terms of, sort of the good and the better? That might be a hard question.
Sorry, I was going to give Andrew a chance there because I know he's done work in some other worlds other than Second Life, and I think my experience has been mostly Second Life focused. I guess I've seen so many really wonderful projects here that it's hard to even. I'm having a hard time thinking of just one example because it depends on the application. In terms of providing a really rich sort of story experience, the Literature Life program, the Macbeth sim, I forget what that one's called, but I've seen lots of educational spaces where they really bring some aspect of a culture or a piece of literature or a piece of art to life in a way that allows you to experience it differently than you can do it in any other medium. And that's, of course, that's the magic of Second Life. That's what's kept most of us here. I can read Macbeth, but it's a totally different experience if I've read Macbeth and then I go to the Macbeth sim, and it's like the experience of being immersed in that space and having the costume on and interacting with other people in that space, or the Roman sim, Roma. Some of the crazy art installations, Douglas Story and Desdemona Enfield have made some just really fantastical kinds of creations that are interactive and sort of blow your mind. Dizzy Banjo used to make some really great stuff too. And I think that's part of the problem in evangelizing this technology, is that the real benefit that I have gotten, and I think many have gotten, is it's almost about my own self-discovery. And that's not something that you can tell someone else about and they get it. They have to actually experience it in order to experience it. You know what I mean? And so when, in terms of what educators are doing with this platform that's really mind-blowing, I think some of the work that's been done in bringing the sort of things that you read about in a textbook and feels kind of dry and dusty, bringing that to life in some kind of an immersive way here, whether it's a historical piece or an art piece or doing architecture collaboratively. Those are the kinds of uses of this platform that I think are really standout uses of it. And I hope that we'll continue to see more ways to do that as the technology matures. One of the things that's really held people back, I think we talked about this before, I still can't hand out a properly formatted text document in here with bold text. So some of the issues that I've seen us face is that you can build a wonderful thing, but communicating on how to use that space can be complicated. Presenting text and other things is still kind of difficult. So as we move forward, forward, I hope that folks will be looking at some of those best practices examples. And your own conference, the Virtual World's Best Practices in Education Conference, highlights lots of really terrific projects. And it's always amazing to me how many new things have come online from year to year. So while there are some golden classics like the NASA Sims and Prim, I can't think of the, oh gosh, my mind's blanking on the name of it, the Van Gogh 3D art installation. I mean, some of those are sort of oldies but goodies in Second Life, but it's amazing to me every year that I see new, wonderful, really terrific things develop, and so many of them that I can't really keep track anymore.
Yeah, Andrew, I'm going to give you the last word because we're going to have to wrap up here, and I realize that Philippe and I have been doing most of the talking.
That's okay. I can tell you, Philippe knows her stuff, and so do you, Kevin. So
yeah.
That's not a problem. Not a problem at all. To piggyback on what Philippe was stating, the reason why I didn't say anything at the beginning because I'm sitting here, and there's so many of these projects, and not just from our organization, but a lot of the stuff that Rivers Run Red is doing, and a lot of the stuff that Electric Sheep was building, and stuff that Deucin and Remedy Communications is doing, and some of the storytelling developments, and some of the stuff that I've seen that is just coming from Dayton, Ohio, from a middle school Java teacher has fascinated me. And really, she hit it home with the virtual storytelling, and that's something that Deucin was just had some articles about a couple months ago. That is some of the most immersive, engaging experiences I've had inside of Second Life. Outside of those engaging experiences that I can do on my own, the multiplayer, the communication, and what we're doing right now with the virtual meetings is some of the other benefits I've found to Second Life into virtual environments. So it really doesn't matter to me where I'm at as long as I have intelligent people to spark an intelligent conversation.
Excellent. Great. Well, listen, I'd like to thank both of you very much for coming and being part of Inside the Avatar Studio. I'm hoping that you'll both come back, if we get a chance to do some follow-up, because I know there's a lot more stuff that's going to be coming out and going to be hitting the education scene over the next few months. So, thank you very much both. And
thanks so much, Kevin. It was great to be here.